is the author of Discipline with Dignity. I was explaining to some young people from Woodland Hills. By the way, where is our Woodland Hills girls from Woodland Hills? Where are you sitting? Okay, stand up. Let's just see all you there. All right. Thank you. They could have been camping tonight and cooking over a fire, but I was explaining that there was a book called Assertive Discipline, which was designed in the 70s to have teachers come up and say, listen, I'm in charge and don't mess with me. And the answer to that came in the 80s with Discipline with Dignity. So I give you Mr. Discipline with Dignity from California, Richard Curwin.
Before I talk, Dan, you want to come up here for a minute? We have something much more important to do first.
Dr. Brentro is my dad, and he's also the dad of Steve, who's sitting in the back. And he probably thinks that we've forgotten that it's Father's Day, but we'd just like to tell him Happy Father's Day.
Happy Father's Day.
And like everybody's dad, ours has a favorite candy. Actually, he has two, which makes him that much better. His first favorite candy is the chocolate-covered cherries. And the second are sugar-covered orange slices. And the best part about giving our dad gifts, especially candy, is that he always shares them. So whatever you give him, he'll give you right back. So we've got 10 boxes of chocolate-covered cherries that he might share with us and 10 bags of orange slices back here. So happy Father's Day.
Thanks. What I'd like to do to begin, could every table elect an official shusher? Someone who goes, shh. Each table picks somebody to do this. Okay? Could all the shushers quiet down your table? Let me hear you go, shh, everybody. Okay, when you hear that, you got to be quiet. I learned this teaching 7th grade. What I used to do is have all of the loudest kids and most obnoxious kids in class be shushers. Because if they only shush themselves, that was usually enough. That would be good enough for me. What I'd like to do is give you 3 different puzzles to solve, 3 maybe unrelated puzzles, but I hope at the end they'll come together. And that's going to be what I'm going to talk about, these 3 puzzles. And I'd like you to solve them at your tables. Okay, the first puzzle. How many people in this room are classroom teachers? How many of you are teachers? Every hand should go up. If you work with kids, you're a teacher. And in my way of thinking, that's one of the highest things you could say to someone, you're a teacher. And some people think teaching is easy. Have you ever heard people say, anybody can be a teacher? Well, I always answer, well, anybody can be a brain surgeon. And they say, you couldn't. And I say, of course I could. I could be a brain surgeon. Give me a green gown, put me in an operating room, and if I don't vomit, I can do it. Because there's always a chance I'll faint. And they say, yeah, but the patient will die. And I say, that's true, but I can do it. I mean, anybody can stand up before children and talk. But a teacher gets kids to want to learn, and that's not so easy to do. In fact, brain surgery is far easier than teaching, because in brain surgery, they anesthetize the brains first. It makes it easy. When was the last time you ever heard a surgeon have to put up with, this operation is boring and I'm not going to do it? Well, I think what makes teaching really difficult, and working with children of all kinds, everybody in this room has the same problem. We never know how well we're doing at any given moment. There's no way to tell, no way to ascertain if we're being successful or not. This leads to great stress, difficulty. We're always re-guessing our decisions, and we never know for sure where we stand because we see the results of what we do many, many years later. Working with children is a hidden harvest profession, and it's all done on faith. So one day you get kind of tired of this, and you decide that you are going to take up a hobby that has a direct linear relationship to how well you do. You know exactly where you stand. And since we're in the area, the part of the country we're in, you decide maybe climbing a mountain is something you could do that's very, very specific. You know exactly where you stand. So you train for this for a whole year. You get a trainer, you join a club, you join a magazine. How many of you have computers and use them? So you do some virtual mountain climbing on the internet. How many people here from California? Okay, Californians, we join support groups. We have because we have support groups for everything. California, you name it, there's a group. And the big day comes and you start to climb the mountain. And you're excited and enthusiastic and energetic, and you start your climb. And it's going beautifully. You just feel wonderful, totally at one with the earth. But by the time you get halfway up, you get very discouraged because you don't think you're going to make it to the top. It looks very, very difficult. And now you have a near fall where you could hurt yourself or even worse. But you keep going. And then you have a slip and you really get really fearful, but you keep going. And with great perseverance and effort, you actually get to the top. And when you get there, you're overwhelmed with two powerful feelings. These are the same feelings anybody feels when you've accomplished something difficult. Maybe this is how you felt when you graduated from college. One is relief. Phew, I did it. And the other is great pride. I did it. And as you look around the mountain, you discover something very unusual on the other side. So you go over there to explore, and you discover there's an escalator. You could have taken the escalator and gone up in 25 minutes. You could have had a cappuccino and a croissant on the way up. So you take the escalator down. And as you're going back to your hotel, you come across a friend of yours. And your friend tells you he wants to climb the same mountain. Okay, here's the puzzle. Do you tell your friend about the escalator? Why or why not? Discuss that at your table. To see. How many of you did not tell your friend about the escalator? Please raise your hand. Did not. How many of you did? Okay, everybody should have raised your hand because there was no third choice. Either you did or you didn't. Did any of you do a diagnostic first and say, well, why do you want to get to the top? To see the view and have a climb? Okay, some people do diagnostics. Did anybody in this room tell your friend about the escalator for a reason that had absolutely nothing to do with choice? Unrelated to choice whatsoever. Anybody? I've heard two. One was from California and one was from Texas. And I'm not going to say this had anything to do with the personalities of people from those states, but the person from California said, I told my friend about the escalator because if he discovered it and I hadn't told him, he might have got angry with me. And the person from Texas said, I told my friend about the escalator because I wanted him to take it. Then I would be the only one who climbed the mountain. So people from California want to be liked, and people from Texas want to win. I don't know. Let me tell you why I told you this. This is a heartfelt belief of mine. There's a difference getting to the top of a mountain by climbing it or taking an escalator. And America seems to have made a choice of what's better. Escalators wins. Everything we seem to do in our country is designed to make things easier, not better. In 1992, it was the first year in history of advertising that sex was not the number one way to sell a product. Fast and easy was. Now, some of you probably want all three together, but that's a different workshop. Fast and easy has become a national religion in some ways. Everything is to make things easier. If you've worked with children in the last 5 years, you've noticed how hard it is to get them to do anything. Why should they? Fast and easier wins. The same year that Albert Bell says, I will not play baseball for less than $8 million a year, even that's not enough, 30,000 people get fired from AT&T. What does that tell a kid about the value of work? We believe that easy is better, and it's impossible to get kids to value effort when achievement is what's measured, not how hard we try. How many people in this room own a microwave oven? Could you raise your hands? Is it everybody? Anybody not have one at your home? Microwave oven. How many do not have one? There are a few people. Well, I never wanted to get one, and my oldest son begged me to get one, and I finally gave in and got him one, and now he's gone, and I use it every day. So that's what happens to them. My father died when I was 4 years old, and we didn't have daycare when I was a kid. We had something much better. We had grandparents. I had a grandmother. And my grandmother came and lived with me to take care of me. And my grandmother was the best cook that ever lived. There was no better cook on earth than my grandmother. But I've discovered most people think their grandmother was a great cook. How many of you had a grandmother who was a great cook? Okay, what I want you to do is close your eyes for a minute. I want you to remember the smell of the kitchen when she baked. Just remember the smell. How many of you can remember rolling dough with your grandmother when you were just a little kid? Remember licking the bowl? Remember this? What bowl do you lick when you microwave? What does it smell like when you microwave? What do kids learn about work when you microwave? You know what your great-grandchildren are going to brag about your children? My grandmother microwaves better than your grandmother. Yes, she does. She's good at microwaving. Well, it's one thing to microwave food. It's another thing to microwave children. And the vast majority of the children you people deal with have been microwaved, not raised. And it's an American tragedy as well as other countries. When it comes to education and it comes to understanding children, it's a major, major tragedy because we value achievement and we don't value effort. It's what you get, not how you got it, that matters. When it comes to school, this really, really teaches kids the wrong values. How many of you that are teachers have some kids that get A's and don't do any work at all? Have kids that work real hard and don't get A's? They get the lowest grades? What do they learn about the value of effort? See, has anyone in this room ever been a coach? Coaches do not teach that you have to win. They teach you have to try. Do you think the coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers is saying they're better than us and we're losers? Or is he saying if we try harder, we can get them next year? In Japan, what's one thing different from America is that they stress effort, not achievement. To get an A in a course in Japan, you have to try hard. If you try hard, you get an A. It doesn't matter what you score. And in Japan, everybody tries hard. Is that people I'm sure have been to Tokyo? When I was in Tokyo, I couldn't believe that the cab drivers wore white gloves and cleaned your seat. You know, I grew up in Boston. It wasn't quite like this. Not long ago, I was in Nebraska, and a woman picked me up at the airport and was driving me here to school, and I said, "What do you do at the school?" And she said, "Oh, I'm just a receptionist." I said, "Why are you saying just? Why aren't you saying, I'm a receptionist?" Because in America, if you're not a star, you're nothing. It's what you achieve, not how hard you try, that matters. But you don't have to be a coach or even Japanese. All you have to be is a parent to understand this. When my first son was born, I was a 7th grade English teacher. And he gave me his very first sentence in his life. He said, "Dada, wawa." Crawled up and said, "Dada, wawa." Can you imagine my disappointment? I said, "David, that's not a sentence. That's only a fragment. There's no verb." Achievement orientation. So he crawled, and then he stood up and took his very first step and fell flat on his face. And I said, C-. That's not walking, that's falling. When it comes to school, and one of the reasons we have so many problems with kids is we measure their achievement and not their effort, and not every kid can achieve. We have a name for kids that try hard and don't achieve and eventually stop trying. We call them discipline problems. That's the name for them. They are behavior problems. They are disruptors, because it's much better to be bad than it is to be stupid. Every one of you would rather have the label bad kid, difficult kid, than stupid kid. So many times, misbehavior is a cover for just inadequacy in school because kids don't learn the way we teach them. Most kids do not learn naturally in a comparative system that stresses achievement. They learn when effort is stressed. So this is a real problem. When it comes to behavior, this really gets to be a serious problem. How many of you work with some kids that are abused, physically abused? How about emotionally abused? How about they come from homes where there's drug and alcohol abuse? How many of you have some kids that are raising their parents instead of the other way around? Raising the younger brother and sister, they could be as young as 3rd and 4th grade, but they're changing diapers, feeding, being responsible. Do any of you work with kids who come from nice middle-class homes, really good homes, but they never see the parents, so they're being raised by Roseanne and Bart Simpson because TV raised them, not the parents? How many of you think that writing a name on a blackboard is going to help a kid like this? Or kicking a kid out? Or saying, wise up? Saying, I've had it with you. I don't like your attitude. How's that going to help a kid like this? But escalators and microwaves seem to be the American tradition. So my advocacy, and what I'm really here to hope that everybody here already knows, is to convince our country that you can't raise children by taking escalators. It's a mountain climb. Now, there are times when you need an escalator. If I had a heart attack on the top of that mountain, I want the doctor taking the escalator, not climbing it. So I'm not saying they're never useful. Sometimes you have to get a kid to stop. And threats have a place, because threats get a quick behavior change. If a kid's about to cross a busy intersection, you never say to them, you know, if you live, we'll discuss this later, you have to say, stop or else, because you want them to stop. But that's the only time I would recommend them. So that's your first puzzle. Now I want to give you the second puzzle. A number of years ago, my partner Al Miller and I had just finished writing our third book on discipline. We added up how much money we made. We figured out we made maybe 8 cents an hour, if we were lucky. No one makes money writing books in education. If anybody here thinks you're going to do this, then choose something else to write about. That's what we did. We decided we're going to write a book that's going to make us big dollars, you know, the jackpot, the lottery. And this is back in the 70s, late 70s. We were driving back from Washington, D.C. up to New York. And we figured there's 2 books you can write that can make you a lot of money. One was how to have great sex, and the other is how to make a lot of money. Now, there are kids here, so I'm not going to tell you how this decision was made. But we decided to write a book on how to make money. And our goal was to interview people who made $1 million a year for over 10 years. And ask them a series of questions about how they think. Things like, how do you deal with decision-making? And how do you deal with risk-taking? And how you deal with success and time management. Not one of the books of what do you invest in? And we named the book $1 Million Mind. And it never got written because Dismal Dignity came out right around the same time, and that kind of cast our career. But we interviewed a number of people, and we asked them one question. How do you deal with failure? And that's your second puzzle. I'd like at your table for you to guess what you think very successful people who've made $1 million a year for over 10 years, what they said when they were asked this question, how do you deal with failure? So discuss that at your table. This room is so large and time is kind of short. I'm not going to ask for what people said, but I'll tell you just what most people offer as a suggestion that doesn't work. Well, they turn lemons into lemonade. They see it as a learning experience. They try harder. They don't really consider it as failure. They consider it a learning opportunity. All those things are not the answer. The answer is, that's a good question. I've never had one. If I do, I'll let you know. Now, I want to tell you about one interview that really hit home. I interviewed Steve Wozniak, and probably some of you know that he's the inventor of the Apple computer. Most of you have a computer that was designed by Steve Wozniak at one point in his career. And in order to do a successful interview, you have to know something about the person. So I luckily met his cousin and had a drink with her about 2 nights before this interview, and she told me these great stories. One is he was divorced, and when his wife left him, she slammed the door in his face. This is how his cousin put it. And said, I wouldn't live with you no matter how much money you have. I can't stand you, and walked out. He also developed the personal computer, and he worked for Hewlett-Packard, and went to them and said, I have a great idea, and they said no. Well, he left them and formed Apple, but it was a failure when he went to them, and they said no. He also put on a rock and roll festival. Maybe some of you remember it, called the US Festivals. He tried to recreate Woodstock in California. He lost $60 million. So when I interviewed him, I went to his Apple headquarters and went to Steve's house on a motorcycle. He had a BMW. He wouldn't interview me unless I played him Defender for an hour, which he beat me 5 zillion points to none. And now he says, okay, put on your tape recorder, let's chat. I said, how do you deal with failure, Steve? He said, well, you know something? I've never had one. But if I get a failure between now and the time your book comes out, I promise you I'll call you. Because it's an interesting question. I never thought of it. I said, well, I heard you were divorced. And it was a bad time for you. Wasn't that a failure? And he said, well, you should see my new wife. She's really a wonderful woman. She's beautiful and intelligent. She's getting her doctorate in Berkeley. She's from England. She has a great accent. And she's on the Olympic swimming team. You know, I'll have you for dinner sometime. Where do you meet her? So what I wanted to say was, denial is not a river in Egypt. You know, this. But I felt challenged. So I said to him, when you went to Hewlett-Packard and said, I have an idea, and they said no, wasn't that a failure? He said, shut off your tape recorder. So I shut it off. This is many years ago, so I think I can say this, because he told me that I'm not allowed to make this public. He said, last year, I gave my cousins and my brother and sister each $4 million as a present. If I worked for Hewlett-Packard, it would have been $4. Does that sound like a failure to you? So I said, the only thing I could think of, what was that, Curwin? Cousin! Didn't work. I was hoping. So then I hit him with the one thing he could not weasel out of. I said, you lost $60 million on a rock and roll festival. Isn't that a failure? He said, have you ever gone to a rock and roll show? I said, yes. He said, did you ever pay up to $35 for a ticket? I said, yes. He said, well, for you to pay $35 with your income, and for me to pay $60 million with my income, that's about the same. He said, I sat in the front row, did you? He said, I got to meet all of the stars, did you? He said, one of us is a failure, Rick, but I don't think it's me. And every other person I interviewed had the same attitude, and the reason I raise this is, we are so worried about success and failure that we don't understand experience. And when it comes to children who have been in trouble, who've had problems, forget those labels. They mean nothing. What matters is, what are you experiencing? How is it working? Who cares about success? Who cares about failure? And especially for you as workers with hard-to-control kids, you experience a lot of failure if you use that as a label that matters. But if you forget that label, you're free to really work with them in a whole different way. Just experience them, feel them, interact with them, appreciate them, understand them, but don't judge it. That will stop you from being effective, and it will stop you from trying all kinds of things that you might have tried if you weren't worried about failing. Okay, I'm going to give you my third puzzle. Last puzzle. When I did my book on hope, maybe some of you have seen it outside, Rediscovering Hope, the way I do most of what I write is talk to kids. So I went around the country and talked to a number of kids, rural kids, urban kids, suburban kids, high school, elementary school. I was in South Central Los Angeles and the South Bronx. I was on all kinds of rural areas, different states. And I had a theory that said the one way you can tell a hopeless child from a non-hopeless child is that a hopeless child can't trust. And a person who can't trust can't bond. So if you really want to know who's hopeless, ask a person who his favorite teacher is. And if they don't have one, that's a hopeless kid. So I asked all these administrators if I could meet with the 10 to 20 most hopeless kids, just by myself, because a kid will tell a stranger anything. I mean, they don't care what they'll say. They're pretty honest. And I sat with these kids and asked them, who's your favorite teacher, expecting to hear, I don't have any. Every single one of them had a favorite teacher. Every one of them. There wasn't a single kid I interviewed. It must have been 5,000 kids that didn't have a favorite teacher. Now, what I'd like you to do is your puzzle, this is your last puzzle. What do you think the quality that made someone a favorite teacher for a kid that's basically hopeless, that's a loser, that's a predicted failure? What do you think the one thing they wanted in a teacher that made that teacher the favorite? Discuss it at your table. In the last 5 years, how many of you have noticed, you don't have to raise your hand, but just kind of nod your head or something. I don't need to raise your hand. How many of you noticed there are more kids who break rules than ever before in the last 5 years? How many of you noticed that what they do is worse than 5 years ago? And how many of you noticed that they start doing it at a younger age? Okay, this tells us that we're in trouble because whatever we're doing, it's time to stop and do something else. Anybody in this room ever see a movie called The Breakfast Club? It came out in 1988. In The Breakfast Club, there was a kid named Bender who was probably the toughest kid in the movies at that time. Bender was the hoodlum, and everybody was afraid of Bender. When I saw The Breakfast Club in 1988 with my friends, all of them were teachers, and they said, if I had Bender, I'd get Valium. Of course, now they get Prozac because we've improved. Well, I saw The Breakfast Club a few weeks ago on TV. I guess it was a month ago now. And Bender's not that bad anymore. Actually, Bender's pretty good. Compared to today's kids, Bender is incredible. He's easy. Because Bender had a quality that most troubled kids today don't have, which I consider the most troubling quality in children, lack of remorse. It's something that's extremely serious because it's a values conflict. It says, I don't have values. If you don't have remorse, you don't have values. Bender was tough on the outside, but he had remorse, so he could be reached. The kids that I interviewed all said one quality. Probably very few of you got this. If you did, I'm amazed because most people don't think of it. But the minute you hear it, you'll know it's the right one. They said, they believed in me. They believe in me. Why is that so important? Because if someone doesn't even believe in themselves, how is it that, they obviously need someone else to believe in them, or they can't go on. They need somebody to believe in them. And what I want to do is just tell you one last story about a girl I met who is the Bender of 1996. She would eat Bender alive. I was in San Diego, California, just last fall, and I had made a disciplinary dignity presentation, and I was halfway through and we were going to lunch with the administrator. And the principal said to me, you know something? That sounds so good, but you can't really do it with today's kids. I said, why not? It works. I know it works because I've seen it. And he said, no, today's kids are too hard. If you give any inch to them, they'll eat you alive. You've got to be hard back. So I said, well, how hard are you willing to get? Because if you're going to get as hard as they are, you've got to get pretty hard. Last year in New Jersey, some teacher said to a 5th grade kid, you sit down or else. And the kid pulled out a gun and said, or else what? Are you willing to get that hard? What are you going to do with hard kids? If getting hard with kids worked, then the kids you work with would be the best kids on earth because they've had it hard already. Getting hard with them is what got them where they are now. Their lives aren't easy. So he said, well, what do you think discipline with dignity is going to do for her? And he points to this one girl in the cafeteria. This is Bender, 1996. This girl, maybe you've seen girls like this. This is the first time I've encountered one. Now I've seen many kids like this. Severe body piercings, tattoos. She had a chain that went from her tongue to her nipple. This is fairly severe. Purple hair, dyed orange, the top shaved to the sides. Her boyfriend, she was 14 years old. Her boyfriend was 28 years old. He was a motorcycle gang leader. And you've all seen him on detective shows like Rockford. Whenever Rockford goes to the desert, there's always a motorcycle gang. Her boyfriend was like the leader. When she says, my boyfriend will kill you, he will. And he said, what is discipline dignity going to do for her? And I said, well, what are you going to do for her? Are you going to give her detention? She's been to prison. She spent 5 years in federal prison. I forgot to mention that. I said, are you going to call her mother? Are you going to write her name on a blackboard? Are you going to get in her face? You cut this out or else. I'm fed up with you and I'm not going to put up with it. And then she says, I'll kill you. Now which one of you is afraid? So I asked if I could talk to her. And I'm in the middle of writing a book about violence. It's coming out next fall. We just finished it up. And I asked if I could talk to her, and he said, sure, go ahead. So I sat down at her table. And I don't want to offend anybody, and there's children here, so I guess I have to say this a little bit differently. But she said, who the F are you? I said, I'm writing a book about violence, and I wonder if you could answer a couple of questions. She said, I hate people like you, not in those words. Get out of here, not in those words. I said, well, I'll make a deal with you. If you just answer 2 questions honestly, if you have the courage to be honest, I'll put your name in my book. She wasn't someone that looked like she was afraid of being noticed, so I thought that was a good incentive. And she says, you put my name in your book? I said, if you have the courage to be honest, because honesty is what matters to me. She said, there's nothing someone like you could do to hurt someone like me. Once again, not quite in those words. What's your first question? I said, are there any teachers in the school, anybody at all, who you will listen to, who you do what they ask you to, you'll learn for, and you'll obey if they want you to? She said, that's a dumb question. I said, just answer it. And she said, well, maybe a couple. Yeah, I'd say a couple. I said, what's different about those teachers from all your other teachers? Because that's what I'm after. That's what I want to find out. And then something happened I didn't expect. Her face kind of squenched up, and her eyes reddened. And she said, as she started to cry, they are the stupidest people on earth. They are so dumb. They tell me if I try hard, I can go to college. Look at me. I'm not going to college. They tell me I can get married someday. Yeah, right. I can get married. They tell me if I apply myself, I can get a job. Mister, you're looking at a dead woman. I am dead. I got 2 years to live max. I'm going back to prison. They're going to kill me. If I don't go back to prison, they're going to kill me anyway. I don't have a chance. And then tears start rolling down her cheeks like I've never seen before. Tears just rolling down. She can hardly talk, and she says, They are so stupid because they believe in me. And if I'd like to leave you with any message at all about how to work with kids, is to start believing them. I don't think we should be soft with them, but being hard with them is no answer. If hard worked, they wouldn't be this way. We have to give them the skills they need to survive and the courage to do it. Thank you very much.